My name is Silas Ford. I'm 29 years old, and I build wooden boats in a shop on a cold stretch of coast in a town called Harlow's Bend, where the fog rolls in most mornings and half the men make their living off the water. I didn't grow up here. I didn't grow up building anything. I grew up nowhere, really. My mother left when I was 6. I don't remember much about her except the smell of cigarette smoke and a yellow coat she used to wear. My father I never met at all, not even a photograph. After that, it was foster homes, one after another, 11 of them by the time I turned 18. Some were fine, some weren't. None of them were mine. By 22, I was drifting through towns up and down the coast with everything I owned in a duffel bag, taking day work where I could find it, hauling crates at a dock, painting fences, whatever paid enough for a meal and a tank of gas. I slept in my truck more nights than not. I was the kind of young man the world had quietly written off before he'd even started, and if I'm honest, I'd mostly agreed with its verdict. I didn't expect much from life. I didn't ask for much either. Then, on a gray afternoon 7 years ago, I walked into Amos Colby's boat shop looking for a day's work, and my whole life changed. It would take me most of those 7 years to understand how much. Amos was a master boat builder, the last real one on that coast, the kind who still worked mostly by hand, who could tell you the age and mood of a piece of oak just by running his thumb along the grain. He was in his 60s then, big and slow-moving, with hands like weathered rope, and an unhurried way of looking at a person that made you feel measured but never judged. I remember standing in the doorway of his shop, rain coming down behind me, my duffel bag soaked through. He looked at me a long moment, this drifting kid with nothing to show for himself, and I braced for him to send me away, the way most people did. "You know how to work?" he asked instead. "I know how to work," I said. "Then don't just stand there," he said, and waved me in out of the rain. That was it. No interview, no questions about where I'd come from or where I was going. Just a rag thrown at my chest and a plank of red cedar to sand down. Amos had a daughter, Nell. She was 23 then, away at university in the city studying architecture. She came home 2 or 3 times a year, mostly around the holidays and for the long stretch of summer. I remember the first time I saw her. It was maybe 2 months after I'd started. She came through the shop door soaked from a sudden rain, a canvas bag of books slung over one shoulder, dark hair plastered to her face, laughing at her own bad luck with the weather. She stopped when she saw me sanding a hull in the corner. "You're new," she said. "Started in spring," I said, not sure what else to add. "Dad doesn't warm up to people easily," she said, dropping her bag by the door and shaking rain out of her hair. "If you're still standing here next time I'm back, that'll mean something." I was still there next time, and the time after that. Year after year, whenever Nell came home, she'd find me in the shop, and something about those visits became the shape my whole year was built around, though I wouldn't have admitted that to anyone, least of all myself. We became friends in the easy way that surprises you later when you look back and realize it was never just that. She'd sit on the dock while I worked, asking questions about wood and joinery, genuinely curious, not just making conversation. I'd ask her about the buildings she was designing in her coursework, half understanding her sketches but liking the way her hands moved when she explained them. Some evenings we'd walk down to the tide pools after the shop closed and just sit there for an hour without talking much, watching the light change over the water. It never once felt strange, that silence. It felt like something I hadn't had before, the kind of quiet you only get comfortable with around a person you trust completely. I couldn't tell you the exact day I fell for her. It wasn't a single moment. It built up slowly, the way varnish does on a hull, coat after coat, so gradual you don't notice the shine until suddenly the whole thing is glowing and you can't remember what the raw wood looked like underneath. But I never said a word, not once, in 5 years. How could I? I was a kid Amos had picked up off the street, penniless, with no family and no name worth mentioning. He'd given me work, a roof, a trade, patience nobody else had ever shown me. And Nell, his only daughter, university-educated, bound for a career and a life in the city, with a future that had nothing to do with sawdust and salt air. Every time I imagined saying something to her, I heard the same voice in my head, "You have no right." So I said nothing for 5 years and told myself that watching her from a careful distance was enough. There were moments, if I'm honest, where I almost broke. The summer I turned 26, Nell came home for 2 full months before her final year of school. We spent nearly every evening together, building a small skiff just for fun, one we never intended to sell, just something to work on side by side. She'd hand me tools before I asked for them. I'd know, without looking, which one she meant. One night we took the finished skiff out just past sunset, rowing out into water gone the color of a bruise, purple and gold at the edges. She trailed her hand in the water and said, out of nowhere, "I don't know if I want the life everyone thinks I want." "What do you mean?" "The firm job, the city, all of it." She looked at me, and for one long moment neither of us said anything, and I actually thought, that this might be the moment, that I might finally say what I'd been carrying. My chest went tight with it. Then a light came on in the shop behind us, Amos checking on something before bed, and the moment passed, the way moments do when you let them, and neither of us said anything more than good night when we tied the skiff back to the dock. I told myself it was for the best. I told myself a lot of things, that year and the years after, that I was protecting Amos's trust, that I was protecting Nell from a mistake, tying herself to a nobody with no family and no future beyond a boat shop, that I was protecting myself most of all from a rejection I was certain would come, because why wouldn't it? What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that Amos had already made up his mind about all of it, long before I had. Last year, everything changed again. Amos started slowing down that spring. Nothing dramatic, just small things. He'd sit longer between tasks. His hands, always so steady, would tremble faintly by the end of a long day. I noticed, but he waved off my questions the way he waved off most fuss, until the morning he collapsed in the shop doorway and I had to carry him to the truck myself and drive faster than I'd ever driven in my life to the clinic 2 towns over. His heart, years of hard labor catching up all at once, the doctor said, not unkindly but plainly. Amos took the news the way he took everything, quiet, steady, already 3 steps ahead of the rest of us in his own mind. Nell came home from the city the week after the diagnosis and didn't leave again. She deferred the job offer she'd been sitting on, told her firm she needed time, and moved back into her old room above the shop. I watched her become someone I hadn't seen before in those months. Fierce, focused, driving Amos to appointments, arguing with doctors, staying up late reading about treatments none of us fully understood. I stayed too, though nobody had to ask me to. Where else would I have gone? In the last stretch of that year, when Amos was mostly confined to short hours and long naps, he called me into the shop alone one afternoon and told me he wanted to build one more boat. His own design, he said. Something he'd been sketching for years in the margins of his notebooks, never quite finished. "This one's going to be my best," he said, and there was a strange brightness in his eyes when he said it, something I couldn't place at the time. "And you're going to finish it, however far I get." "Why now?" I asked him. "Why this one?" He just shook his head, that small, almost smile of his. "Everything gets ready in its own time, Silas. You'll understand when it's done." I didn't push. I should have, maybe, but I didn't. We worked on it together as much as his strength allowed, some nights just 20 minutes before he'd have to sit down, other nights, on his better days, 2 or 3 hours side by side, the way we used to. He was particular about this one in a way I'd never seen him be about any other project. Certain measurements he wouldn't explain. A compartment built into the stern that he insisted on sealing himself, refusing to tell me what was inside. "Blueprints," he said when I asked. "For the next one. Old habit." I didn't believe him even then, not entirely, but I let it go. 3 months ago, on a Tuesday morning with gray light coming through the shop windows, Amos passed away in his sleep. Nell found him. I heard her cry out from the house and ran up before I even understood what I was running toward. The boat sat unfinished in the shop for 2 weeks after that. Neither of us could look at it. The funeral came and went. Half the town showed up. Fishermen and boat owners going back decades. People whose lives Amos had touched in 100 small ways none of us had ever tallied up. Nell stood through all of it with a composure that scared me a little, the kind of calm that comes from holding something too heavy to put down. It was Nell, actually, who came to me after the funeral and asked when I was going to finish the boat. I promised him, I said. I don't know if I have it in me right now. He'd want you to, she said. He built everything with a reason, Silas. You know that better than anyone. So I went back to it. Alone, mostly, working late into the nights because the days felt too loud, too full of condolences and casseroles and people not knowing what to say to either of us. I followed his drawings exactly, every plank, every joint, every measurement, down to the sealed compartment in the stern that I left untouched, the way he'd asked. Tonight, 3 months and countless nights later, the boat was finished. Nell had stayed on in Harlow's Bend the whole time, handling the estate, the paperwork, the slow unwinding of a life. Tonight she'd been going through her father's desk, something she'd been putting off for weeks, and found an old leather journal tucked behind a drawer of receipts and half-finished sketches. She came into the shop around midnight, journal in hand, her face pale in the light of the single bare bulb hanging over the finished hull.